You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today our guest is Alexiss Smith. After battling perfectionism and clinical depression, Alexiss was diagnosed with an eating disorder at the age 15. She spent 6 days in a primary children's hospital, 4 months with a feeding tube, and months of recovery with a specialized therapist, dietitian, and pediatrician. Lexie has since recovered from anorexia and orthorexia and is a podcast host, motivational speaker, therapist, and training and advocate for overall mental health, which I am so excited to talk to her today. Do you want us to call you Lexie or Alexis?
Either is fine. It doesn't matter.
What do you prefer? I have my granddaughter who I got to name. I called her Alexis because her mom made me give her a grown-up name, but we call her Lexie.
Yeah. You can call me Lexie. That's what most people call me by, but.
Perfect. So Lexie, the first thing we ask everyone to do is to share a story of hope with us, because I believe our stories, those journeys were given to us for a reason, and it literally goes out and touches the world and creates change. So do you want to share your story with us today?
I would absolutely love to. So I'll try and keep it fairly brief because I could honestly talk about it for forever, but long story short, I started to develop an eating disorder at the age of 15. I was really, really focused on being healthy. I wanted to do that by eating better and exercising more. It was everything that I had been taught in health classes growing up, and slowly but surely things really started to spiral out of control with fitness tracking and compulsive exercise and different things like that. So in October of 2017, I was diagnosed with anorexia. Come to find out, it was actually more of what we call orthorexia, which is more of an obsession with health. It isn't right now a recognized mental illness or an official diagnosis in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And then after my official diagnosis of anorexia, I was in, like you said, primary children's hospital for 6 days, and they took great care of me there. I was miserable during the time, but looking back, I appreciate all of their care. And then I also had a feeding tube that I had for the following 4 months. So I took that home with me. I had it 24/7. I went to school with it. I had it, Christmas morning, on New Year's Eve, all the way until February 7th. And that's when that feeding tube was finally removed. I was able to reach weight maintenance. And my recovery was really able to just springboard into a place of advocacy. My mindset really started to shift, and I started to be really upset and mad at my eating disorder for the things that it had taken from me, and for the possibilities that I could have achieved and those that were taken from me. And so I mustered all of that energy together and I put that towards advocacy. So that looked like motivational speaking to youth groups in my area. It looked like joining other individuals in the community to advocate for legislative changes in schools, including like an Eating Disorder Prevention in Schools Act through the National Eating Disorder Association. It looked like attending NEDA, the National Eating Disorder Association walks, raising awareness and fundage for critical research that should be done on eating disorders, and being very, very active on social media. So I think my story is very hopeful for those that are in recovery from an eating disorder and just going through mental health in general, because unfortunately they're not quite as optimistic outcomes as sometimes as my situation is. But I often say that I'm standing living proof that full recovery is very real.
By the way, I love your story. I'm really excited that you're here today because this is a topic that I don't know a whole lot about. And yet I'm really passionate about it because I know people who struggle with this, and they struggled in silence for a really long time. And it's kind of like you see the signs, but they're explained away super easily. And so you're like, well, maybe that could be it. What are some of the signs if we're looking to recognize what's going on with maybe our children, our grandchildren, our friends, family? What are some of the signs that we can look at?
Yeah, so there's definitely a bunch of different things, especially depending on which eating disorder it is. There's so many different types of eating disorders. So You want to be kind of just have an eye out for changes in food, like at the dinner table. Is there changes in how they're plating their food, or are they playing games with their food? Are they looking very distracted while they're eating? Are they being very sneaky around food? Are they only eating when other people are around? Or are they even like hiding food in their bedrooms? Are they um, taking frequent bathroom visits after eating? Different things like that. And then as well as just looking at, there are some physical symptoms that you can look at. You can't look at somebody though and tell if they have an eating disorder because they come in all different shapes and sizes. Eating disorders don't discriminate against gender, ethnicity, weight, size, shape, whatever. They don't discriminate. So you can't really look at someone and decide, but you could notice some physiological changes. Some people will get very cold, so maybe they'll start to layer their clothing or try to hide their bodies with baggy clothing in some way. They'll develop like some really thin hair along the body that tries to keep them warm, or they'll start to lose their hair um, as a symptom of malnutrition. So there's a few different things, but really you just want to keep your eye out for anything that's abnormal, anything that just doesn't seem quite right with a relationship with food or a relationship with exercise. Anything that seems out of the ordinary or that has slowly just gone a little haywire is what you kind of want to keep an eye out for.
Change comes from within. And so as parents, of course, we can force our children into facilities and try to get them the care that they need. But still, the changes really comes from within you. So when was that moment where you found that strength and courage to create that change in yourself?
Yeah, so at the beginning of my recovery, I definitely did not want to recover. Recovery in a lot of ways was harder than having an eating disorder. Um, and I didn't know how freeing recovery would be. So I didn't really fight for it. And I was there because I didn't have a choice. My parents were making me, I was in the hospital, I had no other option. And eventually I was recovering then for my parents and for my doctors and for even like my sisters and the people in my community that were kind of cheering for me, but I was never recovering for myself. And eventually along that process, I finally had to decide that, you know what, I deserve a successful future without an eating disorder. And so I fought for myself and I fought for those individuals that I would come to advocate for and those individuals that I hadn't yet met and possibly still haven't met, that I'm here to reach out to and to help and to strengthen. And so I recovered for those individuals and I recovered for myself. And that's kind of what springboarded my recovery is when I decided to switch that mindset and to choose recovery every single day. Having an eating disorder is not a choice, but recovery is very much a choice, and it has to be a choice every single day. A choice that you make over and over and over and over again, with every ounce of strength that you have. So that's kind of when it shifted for me, is when I finally decided to say, you know what, I deserve this, without anybody else in the picture. I deserve this for me.
By the way, you have said a couple of times, you talk about it being a mental health issue. And I think a lot of people do not connect eating disorders with mental health. And it is absolutely a mental health issue. Something brought you and others to this point, and you weren't able to get out of it on your own. Like it's definitely a mental health issue. And I wish that I was a mental health doctor because I would tell you exactly why it is, but it is a mental health issue. And just telling someone that you can do this, you look beautiful, that isn't going to make the change, because it definitely is something much deeper. What was the one reason that you decided to start controlling the way you ate? Was it body image? Was it just to have control? I mean, there's so many reasons. What was your reason for controlling that?
Yeah, so first of all, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was just sick, like the person next door in the hospital. I thought that I would be, branded as mentally ill for the rest of my life. And I had to eventually come to terms with, what, my body and my brain are malnourished, just like the kid next door. And I'm here receiving treatment from medical professionals, just like the kid next door that's having surgery on their leg for, whatever. And so that was an important distinction for me to make as well. And then I often say that my favorite mental health statistic is that 5 out of 5 people have mental health. That's my
Yeah.
favorite. That's my favorite to share, is that 5 out of 5 people have mental health. And that's so very true. And so the thing for me that was underlying my eating disorder, and it takes a lot of work and months to figure out what exactly is under this. But for me, that was a lot of depression. That was a lot of perfectionism, like toxic clinical perfectionism. And so that for me was what was really underlying the eating disorder. But I think the important piece of this is to really figure out, it could be different for anyone. It could be some type of trauma, some type of abuse, some type of social anxiety. It could be a lot of different things. It could be body image. But the important thing is to not stop your recovery once you've fixed the eating disorder. You have to fix the eating disorder, and then you have to dive deeper and figure out what's underneath, what's underlying that eating disorder, if you want to get to a full lasting recovery. And so I think that that's what's critical. Unfortunately for me, I had a very educated, specialized eating disorder therapist who had treated many individuals. And so she really, she fought eating disorders very aggressively, and she was not willing to let me leave her office until every crumb had been exposed and we figured everything out. And eventually at the end of my therapy, it was like we were beating a dead horse, because I was like, I swear there's nothing left that we can talk about. We've been here for months and months and weeks, and doing this over and over and over and over again. And we had to beat it down to the very last crumb. And so that's really important as well. And then although body image wasn't part of the real systematic root of my eating disorder, eventually along the way, I did have some of those thoughts and some bad body image and just a lot of hate towards my body, not a lot of respect. And so I eventually was able to come to terms with the fact that my body isn't just beautiful. I mean, sure, maybe it is, but so what? It's the point of, what can my body do? That's where real body image resilience comes from, is when we can look at our body image as more than an image, is when we can look at it for what it does. We can walk across the street and pick up the mail. We can play piano. We can cook for our family. We can, I can have children. I can donate blood to save lives. I can do all of these different things with my body. And that's why I love my body, not because I'm looking at it from an outside objective perspective. And so I had to switch that mindset as well. And I think that's super critical when it comes to this idea of body neutrality or body acceptance or body respect.
I love that. So now the good part of things, right? You go through your journey, you learn a lot, but what you're doing now, that's so powerful. Like, tell us a little bit about where that journey led you and why you're doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I I often say I didn't go through what I went through for nothing. And I think a lot of people go through an eating disorder and then they decide, you know what, that's a thing of the past. I'm going to leave it in the past. And that's fine. If that's what they choose to do, so be it. Your life without an eating disorder post recovery is going to be absolutely fantastic. But for me, I just had this spark that it seemed to be like something that would be a part of my life forever. And so it kind of became my mission and my passion. And slowly but surely, I just kind of started to get wrapped up into advocacy. I'm very, very active on social media. I have a podcast of my own. I do some motivational speaking on the side. I have a self-published workbook that I do. Hopefully in the future, I'll get into more coaching and then obviously be more of the therapist side of that, open my own practice. I've got big dreams, big dreams for the eating disorder treatment that I'd like to do and provide. But it is so hopeful because I'm able to use what I went through for good. And I'm able to say, you know what, if I can do it, you can do it. And if recovery wasn't worth it, I wouldn't be recovered. And I wouldn't have put this much time and energy and education and money into advocacy if it wasn't worth it. And so that's my message to people, is kind of like, hey, you know what? Look at me as an example and look at what I've been through and look at the hope that I can give you. And if I can do it, you can do it. And that it's totally worth it and that it's totally real.
Wow. I love that. What are, like, maybe if you were, so let's just say you're in your beautiful practice now and you're coaching women and men who come to you with eating disorders of all different kinds. What are like 2 or 3 things that you would tell them to be aware of to maybe start changing, or even if it is to voice that you need help. So what are 3 things that you think would work for them right now that they can start moving towards a better direction? Because I believe seriously, it all starts with the first step. Whatever that step is, however small it is, that first step has you moving in the right direction.
Yes. So the first thing that comes to my mind is my first recovery breakthrough was before I was even diagnosed. And that's admitting that I had a problem with food. That's looking at myself and saying, okay, this isn't normal. What am I going to do about it? For example, I went out to eat and then I came home and we were having dinner and I just couldn't handle it. Like the anxiety was just too much. And I was crying on my bedroom floor. And then I was looking around and I was like, okay, everybody else that was at Costa Vida this afternoon probably isn't going through what I'm going through right now. This isn't typical. This is abnormal. And so that was key number 1. And that was my first breakthrough, is when I was like, okay, just recognizing this isn't quite normal. And I think that I need to do something about it. That was step 1. And even if you don't know where to go, even if you don't know what to say, because what do you say? What are you supposed to say? Hey, by the way, I think I have an eating disorder. Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody knows what to do, where to go, or who to turn to. So I think the best thing is admitting it to yourself and then finding anybody. It doesn't matter. It can be a parent, it can be a sibling, it can be a friend, it can be a mental health professional, it can be somebody on a hotline. It could be me. Reach out to me on Instagram for all I care. Message somebody, talk to somebody and say, I'm not really sure what to do. Can you please help me? What resources do you think I should do? I have no idea where to turn. I don't know how serious this is. I don't know if I need help. I don't know if I should get help, but I want to be safe. I want to be safe than sorry, right? I don't want to, go about this and then end up somewhere far from where I could be. So that's key number 1, is recognition, is probably the first most important step. The second thing that I often think of is giving yourself grace. That's one of the things that I say a lot, is give yourself grace. We oftentimes cut slack for so many other individuals in our lives. We give everyone else some self-compassion and we throw around slack for them, but we never cut ourselves our own slack. And I think it's important to give ourselves that grace and to say, hey, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can with the knowledge that I have now and the opportunities and experiences that I have in my toolbox. So I'm going to give myself the grace and just say, you know what, you're doing the best that you can. You're going to validate yourself. And I think that that's also very, very critical, whether you're going through a mental illness or not. Everybody kind of is so hard on themselves. And so we have to start extending that grace to ourselves. And the third thing that I think of, especially when it comes to eating disorders and orthorexia in particular, is to ditch diet culture. And diet culture can be, oh gosh, just about anything. It can be, sometimes even a crossover with the beauty industry. There's like a little gray area between diet culture and beauty industry that I think when you're looking at magazines, when you're looking at advertisements, photoshopped individuals, advertisements for keto, paleo, Noom, Weight Watchers, all of these different things like that. And then as well as like products such as fitness trackers, your special fit foods, or diet ice cream, or whatever it may be. Those are diet culture. And you don't recognize those things until I never recognized those things until I went through what I went through. And now I notice it everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. It's plastered on billboards and on books and in movies, and everywhere you look, there's diet culture. And there's no way to avoid it. So you just have to recognize it and say, okay, that's diet culture. I'm ditching that forever, for good. I'm never going to indulge in that. I'm never going to participate in that. I recognize it and I'm going to put it to the side because I'm not a part of that in any way, shape, or form.
Lexie, I think that was the most powerful thing you said, because I say this on the show all the time, that diet, literally that word just means what we put in our mouth. That's it. Diet is like, what do we eat during the day? It never was meant to be associated with weight loss or muscle mass, or that all was how it became through commercials and them creating, like you said, this culture around how they can make more money on their products, which they're doing a great job because it's a multi-billion-dollar business.
Right.
And they're doing that at your benefit. That doesn't mean that like losing sugar in your diet is not a good thing for you. It doesn't mean that for those who are vegan, like maybe not eating meat is what you prefer to do. It doesn't mean any of that, but diet just means what we put in our bodies.
Right. And I think that a lot of times I'm a big like advocate and supporter of the quote unquote anti-diet movement. And we kind of have to break that down because for example, I've talked to multiple anti-diet dietitians and I'm like, okay, please explain this because some people are very, very confused as to what an anti-diet dietitian is. And there's really those two forms, like you said, because diet literally means what we're eating. But when we say anti-diet in that kind of a reference, we're meaning anti-restriction, anti-food rules, anti-things like that. And so it's not anti-health, it's not anti-fitness, it's not anti-wellness, but it's just anti-diet culture, if that makes any sense. So there's kind of that distinction that you have to make about these two different forms of what diet can really mean. So oftentimes when I say ditch dieting, ditch diet culture, I'm talking restrictive dieting, not just what you're putting in your mouth. Because yes, that is a very important distinction to make because there is absolutely no way that you can ever completely ditch your diet of what you put in your mouth every day.
Well, tell us a little bit about what's on your podcast, because I would love people to start tuning into your podcast where they can get inspired, hear stories. Like, what do you share on your podcast?
Yeah, so I have shared like my story more in depth on my podcast, as well as ask some questions that I wish I had the answers to while I was in recovery for an eating disorder. So, for example, things about weight maintenance, set point, body neutrality, body image, anxiety and depression, coping skills, different things like that. And then I also just really try to provide hope to listeners, and I try to take down the stigma surrounding mental health and diagnoses. So I've had some fabulous individuals that have come to talk about their experiences about schizophrenia or their experiences with being a victim of rape, or experiences with their anxiety, their depression, their eating disorders. I'll soon have episodes about dissociative identity disorder and just a variety of different topics that are mental health. It's kind of the one-stop shop for mental health, mental illness, and then we kind of cover it all with a specialty in eating disorders and body image.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called Every Ounce Podcast. It's called the Every Ounce Podcast. And then my Instagram, which is kind of the main hub of everything I do as well, is at everyounce.of-strength.
I love it. I think you're so inspiring. One of the other things that I wanted to really point out that you said, and I was taking some notes because I think that you're saying a lot of really important things, but it's a struggle for you every day. It's kind of like if you tell an alcoholic once they've got sober, they're good, they're fixed. They're not. They have to work every day to not go back into that pattern that they were in. And eating is the same way. It's the same as if we're overeating, undereating, whatever that is, it becomes this pattern that starts making us unhealthy. And so I love that you separated that as it's a struggle for you every day. It's something you work on every day. It's something you chose to do for yourself every day. So it doesn't just stop at that first step, getting the help, right? It's something that you keep walking towards.
Yeah. And I think recovery is so hard because you do have to choose it every single day. You have to keep going every single day. But I think one thing just to clarify is that I don't struggle with it anymore. It's not an issue for me. And that's what I mean by full recovery. I don't have to choose recovery every day. I just live my life. I wake up in the morning and I don't weigh myself anymore. I don't count my calories anymore. I don't walk to the kitchen and am in distress about what I'm going to eat. It's not an issue. And I don't expect it to be an issue in the future. I can't say with 100% surety that it won't be, because statistically it technically could be, but I seriously doubt that I will ever relapse just because of how much advocacy I'm a part of. But I think that is even more hopeful that, like, you know what, you only have to choose this recovery. You have to fight this every single day. And that's why I say you have to fight with every ounce of strength every single day until you reach a point of full recovery. And from there, it is downhill. It is living life so free and so hopeful. And your life is full of so much healing and health. And it's absolutely just beautiful.
That actually is very beautiful. So there is hope for all of you who are listening. I would definitely connect with Lexie on her podcast, follow her on Instagram, give her a shout out. Just tell her, look, I heard you on the podcast and I would love to be a part of your movement, because it takes all of us to make change, right? One of us can start that change, but it really starts happening when all of you start collaborating with us and coming on board and sharing your voices. I'm very proud of you, by the way. This is a grandma me coming out. I'm so proud of you for not only taking those steps, getting through your journey, but going out there and shining a light on it, becoming the voice for it and helping others. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm so sorry I was a little off today, but you are amazing. So thank you, Lexie.
You are so very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show. That'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.